Even within Chicago, Jewish history is a story of migration. As Eastern European Jews were leaving Maxwell Street in the 1910s, South Side German Jews were moving further south to Douglas, Grand Boulevard, Kenwood, and Hyde Park. Sinai congregation moved to 46th and Grand Boulevard in 1912. KAM to 50th and Drexel in 1920. But within 40 years, Jews had moved out of most Southside neighborhoods. Today, the old KAM is the home of Jesse Jackson's Operation Push. There are many such remnants of the South Side's Jewish past, if you know where to look. In many cases, former synagogues now serve as black churches. Hyde Park is one South Side area where many Jews still live. German Jews came there first.
I think the attraction was that it was a new, fresh area where Jews were welcome and coming in, but it was not a Jewish community the way Maxwell Street was. When I was 6 or 7, I asked my mother, why don't we go to church the way the Nicholsons do, who live next door to us? My mother turned to my father and said, well, you tell him, Sam. And he didn't tell me much. But then I realized that we were Jews.
Many Jewish students attended Hyde Park High School, like future jazz legend Mel Torme.
Oh no, it's just the nearness of you.
After World War I, some upwardly mobile Eastern European Jews began moving to Hyde Park too. They founded their own congregations, like Rodfai Zedek, which is still in Hyde Park today. A little south of Hyde Park is an area that some Jews of Eastern European descent remember with a special fondness, South Shore. At one time, some 20,000 Jews lived there and in nearby places like Pill Hill and Jeffrey Manor. They shared the area with many other ethnic groups.
It was a different atmosphere than the West Side. You never heard Yiddish spoken on the street as you did on the West Side.
The West Side, or as it has been jokingly called, the Great Vest Side, was Lawndale. This is where large numbers of Jews from the Maxwell Street area began migrating in the 1910s. Of course, some Maxwell Street Jews migrated elsewhere: Old Town, Lakeview, Edgewater, Uptown, and Albany Park to the north. Logan Square, West Town, Wicker Park, Humboldt Park, and Austin to the northwest and west. But Jews were the minority in all of those neighborhoods. In Lawndale, Jews were the overwhelming majority. In fact, no other neighborhood before or since has been home to so many Jews or so alive with Jewish culture. Today, like the old South Side Jewish neighborhoods, it's majority African American. But Irving Cutler, the author of The Jews of Chicago, remembers life in the neighborhood where he grew up like it was yesterday.
On Friday nights, on nice nights, you'd have a lot of young people on the street here. They'd usually meet at Independence Square, which is behind us a few blocks, and there they'd be dancing and singing to all hours of the night. At its peak, around the 1930-1940 period, there were about 100,000 Jews in the Lawndale area. They made up about 40% of all of the Jews of the whole Chicago metropolitan area.
Douglas and Independence Boulevards were the residential core of Lawndale. They were lined with dense middle-class housing, 3 flats and 6 flats. But the wide boulevards gave neighbors plenty of room to gather. But within a few short years, Jews would be all but gone from Lawndale. In 1955, 11-year-old Harold Ramis's family would join the others moving out. Ramis would grow up to be a Hollywood director and star of such movies as Ghostbusters. But in 1955, Lawndale was the only home he had ever known, and it was changing rapidly and dramatically.
It was almost exclusively Jewish as far as I knew. And then we started seeing the first African-American kids in school, and it's like I don't even remember seeing their families. I just saw some kids in school, and then a few more kids in school, and then I think that's when the big move to Rogers Park and Lincolnwood and Skokie happened.
Actually, there were many reasons why Jews left Lawndale in the 1950s. For one thing, post-war prosperity brought the dream of owning a home within reach.
One of the shortcomings of the neighborhood, in a way, was there were very few single-family homes. As you look around, you'll see there are 2 flats and there are 3 flats.
But as people started getting some ability to move out of the 2 flats and 3 flats and 18 flats, they wanted homes.
A lot of veterans came home from the war. They got very good loans from the government.
So in the 40s and 50s, as Jews could afford to leave Lawndale, they all started moving to West Rogers Park. Some stopped in Albany Park for a while.
As early as 1930, the northwest side neighborhood of Albany Park was about half Jewish. Jewish businesses lined Lawrence Avenue near Kimball, at the end of the Ravenswood L line. Today, the area still has an Orthodox population, but it's also home to Koreans, Latinos, Arabs, and other newly arriving immigrant groups. Many synagogues have become churches. West Rogers Park, a little farther north, held the biggest attraction in the era after World War II. Although it was within the Chicago city limits, it felt like suburbia to Jews moving from the old West Side and other crowded city neighborhoods.
Half of West Rogers Park was farms when I was a kid. Where I live now was prairie.
Well, we moved from an apartment to a single-family home. This was a big deal for us. A small 3-bedroom home in West Rogers Park. Lots of sidewalk to ride your bike on and open spaces to play, good schools. The same reasons people still move to that very block and that very neighborhood.
The big migration of Jews from city to suburbs occurred in the years after World War II, but suburban Jewish settlement began long before that. Early North suburban Jewish communities actually date back to the turn of the 20th century, when a group of affluent Jews built a small settlement in Highland Park called Wildwood and opened the Lakeshore Country Club in Glencoe. Sears president and famous philanthropist Julius Rosenwald built a lakefront estate in Highland Park in 1912, which led other Jews to build homes in the area.
Initially, they were more like summer homes along the lake in the Glencoe Highland Park area. Those areas were very liberal compared to some of the other North Shore suburbs, which had restrictions against Jews.
Until 1948, property owners could legally restrict the sale of their homes to buyers based on race and religion. These restrictive covenants determined early patterns of suburban Jewish settlement.
The big movement outward to the North Shore was really after World War II. And often in the western part of these lakeshore suburbs, because those were open areas, yet they hadn't been settled. The area that we moved into in West Wilmette was largely Jewish. In fact, virtually our whole block was Jewish. We all moved in at the same time.
To the north and northwest, many Jews now live in Deerfield, Northbrook, Buffalo Grove, and elsewhere in Lake and McHenry counties. Jack Benny and his parents were members of Congregation Am Echad, which started in Waukegan more than 100 years ago and is now located in Lindenhurst. There are also very active and healthy Jewish communities in the south suburbs. Today, Jews live and worship in many south suburban areas, including Flossmoor, Homewood, and Olympia Fields. The west and northwest suburbs also play an important role in Jewish Chicago. There are congregations in the Fox River communities and Joliet, Naperville, Oak Park, River Forest, and many areas in between.